Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Not Another Guitar Pedal. It's a show where I come on here and talk about guitar pedals, guitar effects, and things that make your guitar sound not like a guitar. On the second episode today, we're here to talk about the Champion Leccy Kilter. So what is the Kilter? I would say most generally this falls under the utility category of pedals. But it's okay. This one is not as boring as like a tuner or like a DI box. This one's a lot more fun and creative. So the Kilter is actually a parallel effects loop. And what that means is your guitar is sent first through the input, and then it's split into two. There are two sends here. One send typically goes to another guitar pedal, out of the guitar pedal, back in. And then your second output, that second send, goes to another guitar pedal, back out of that guitar pedal, and then back into the device. And that combined signal comes out of the output of the device. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to combine two effects or two sound signals and either, listen to them strictly in parallel as opposed to one effect into another. You have two separate signals stacked on top of each other. And then also, probably the coolest part about this thing is that there is smack dab in the middle of the two signals is an LFO. And what this LFO does is it creatively blends between the two signals. What do I mean by that? Well, you have two controls on here, really, space and time. And the time knob is basically your tempo. The time knob can also be changed with tap tempo. And the space knob over here, that is how aggressive the blending, the swinging, if you will, between the two signals is. So at the minimum position, you'll notice the two effects are just in parallel. They're side by side. There's no LFO engagement, and the two signals are just stacked on top of each other. So you might have two delays, for example, stacked on top of each other, kind of producing this dual signal effect. As opposed to, I guess having one delay into the other, you could have two different delays with two different delay times combining together in parallel. But where the fun starts to happen is as you push this space knob or depth knob towards the maximum, what you'll find is the signals start to swing between each other. And so what you create is sort of this tremolo effect between two signals. And that effect is really guided by the Electric Druid Stomp LFO. It's a beautiful little LFO. It actually allows you to have 8 different waveforms, which is absurdly high. So lots of flexibility and versatility here. From left to right, you got this up and down wave. You have a square wave. You have a triangle wave, sine wave. This little humpy wave. I don't even know what you call that one. And then 2 different kinds of random movement waveforms. And so where the fun is really with this pedal is what 2 effects you choose to have, sort of in parallel. Because you can start to create some really unique textures and some weird textures. Alright, so right now I'm using the Kilter, not as it's intended really. My guitar is being plugged into the input, and then it has two sends, and these two sends are actually isolated outs, so you're not really going to have much hum or interference between these two outputs. The two sends, one of the sends is going to my amp, and then one of the sends is going to a DI. And this is useful if you're in a recording situation where you need to basically record your amp and a DI, or maybe even two amps in stereo at the same time. So let's have a listen to see how this sounds. Alright, one more time. Let me just show you what that might look like. Again, you'll notice I got my tuner, guitar into tuner. I got the 29 Pedals EUNA activated. So going in and out of the EUNA, and then basically the input of the Champion Leccy Kilter. And then you'll notice there are two sends on the back. And normally these would be the sends that are going to two different pedals. But as you can see, we just got one going to my amp, all the way up there. And then we got one going all the way over here to my DI. This is my DI input on my board over here. So one pedal, two different outputs. Pretty cool. So one thing you will notice with this approach is that we're not really sending the signal back into its return. So what this means is we don't really have the opportunity to swing, or have that tremolo effect between the two amps or two recording signals. Nonetheless, it sort of opens up the usability of this utility device. Alright, so this last application of the Kilter is perhaps the most fun one. We are actually going to be using the two returns on the back here as two inputs. We are actually not even going to use the traditional input on the device. Instead, we're jumping straight to the returns, plugging a guitar in and a keyboard in, actually, and we're going to be playing them live to create this kind of interesting swinged live texture. Other creative applications, you could try two pre-recorded loops or something like that, but this was just an interesting experiment, and goes to show what can be done with this device with a little bit of creativity. So in the intro, actually, that is what you were hearing. You were hearing the combination of my guitar and the keyboard being played together to create this guitar synth texture, that was played live, actually. So let's see what happened. Alright, so here with Charlie. We're going to try something a little different today. We are using the two returns as two different inputs on the Kilter, and using a sine wave to kind of blend between the two signals. And we're just going to try something weird. We're going to use the parallel mixer, the parallel LFO. It's going to be sick. Let's try it out. This thing's pretty cool, right? We explored some of the ways that this pedal can be used sort of beyond its intended functionality. So at the end of the day, yes, this is a parallel effects loop, and we saw how the two effects can either be used strictly in parallel, or we saw how the LFO can sort of, help to create interesting textures between the two effects loops. But we also saw how to use this as sort of like a dual output device, We have one of our signals going to an amp, and we have one going to a direct in. Though you could certainly, again, what we didn't cover necessarily today was, you could use this on two separate amps. You could use it to help facilitate your dry-wet setup. There's a lot of possibilities with the 2 cents on this device, as long as you're plugged into the input. And lastly, we explored how the two returns on this device actually can be used to creatively blend between two loops, or in our case, two different musicians. I was playing guitar, and Charlie over here was playing piano, and we sort of combined those two signals within the Kilter and sent that out to my amp. In that case, actually, we weren't even using the input of the device, the traditional input, so that's pretty cool. So there's a lot of creative applications with the Kilter. And I didn't even get to talk about the phase switch, which allows you to switch between which loop sort of is first in the chain. Is it flipping from A to B or from B to A? That's a handy switch just to kind of change up the textures on the device. I hope you found this episode interesting, and I hope that you find this pedal to be as exciting as I do, because this thing is pretty sweet. I encourage you to check out the rest of the Champion Leccy lineup. They have some amazing effects. Some of my favorites on my pedal board, actually. The Swan Hunter, the Skitter, Woozy. All of them are super duper great devices and kind of help to make your sound more fun. Be on the lookout for the next Champion Leccy release. I believe he's working on a fuzz with a gate attached to it, so that should be interesting. That should be out in April. And be sure to check out Party Nerves. That's the band Wooly is in. Wooly is the person who is behind Champion Leccy, so definitely check out his band and make some cool surf rock tunes. Maybe they're doing shows in the Philly area if you're into that sort of thing. Anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you on the next episode.